What's up everybody, welcome back. I'll tell you what, today is one of those days that we're gonna try a new body of water. Now I know you've probably been on a new body of water and it's like, man, what the heck am I gonna do? Trust me, I've been there. And it's always a progression when you go to a new place. How do you break it down? What do you look for? And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about what we're looking at today and sort of how I break down a fishery and normally utilizing crankbaits to move fast and try to find the fish efficiently. So I'm gonna talk about a little bit of the cover. Right here, you can tell there's some bushes that are flooded in the water in this section right here. There's a little bit of grass growing up. The forage seems like there's a little bit of shad, there's a little bluegill. It is the summertime, okay? So I would assume the fish are gonna be a little bit deeper. I don't anticipate that shallow water game to be the main player, but we're gonna find out. And so I'm gonna look out here a little bit offshore as well, maybe look for some hard spots, look for some grass edges, and just see what depth zone these fish are really keying in on. So when you're on a new body of water, I'm looking at my electronics right away. I'm looking at, okay, there's some grass here. There's a nice little hard bottom edge. You can sort of see how, this is the thing, the brighter your bottom normally, it's gonna show you that hard bottom edge, and this is within the grass. So this is a great little area. Sometimes, you know, it's harder to graph fish when you actually have a lot of grass around for them to hide. So, you know, normally I'm just looking for what type of structure that I'm going to fish and looking for irregularities within that grass. And so this is a perfect example of, I got soft bottom on my right side, I got soft bottom on my left side, but right here on the center, I'm right here on a hard bottom strip. And it doesn't mean it has to be hard bottom rock. It can just be to where it's a little bit harder, maybe it might be gravel, it might be shells. That is what I'm looking for, just something different that those fish are gonna set up on. Okay, so you can sort of see this hard bottom sort of goes down, trails down through here, but I'm looking at this little bush edge, and it obviously makes a point, you know, and when I start fishing a new body of water, I'm gonna go to the obvious first. It just makes it simpler. Start on the major points, major places the fish should group up. It is the summertime, so that's what I'm trying to sort of like, hey, start there, and then you try to find the sneaky stuff. If you ever follow me day in and day out at all, you know I'm always talking about trying to find sneaky places. Well, when you first go to a lake, you got to sort of start on the obvious stuff to get a gauge of what the fish are truly doing. Then you can go look for sneakier stuff in places that are out of the way. So we're gonna start on this point right here and see if we can't get a few bites. It's got some good hard bottom, got some grass. Looks like there's some bait there too. All right, so we just pulled up on this point. We got 3 hard baits in various depth ranges, from basically a 4-foot diver to about 10 or 12 feet. So I'm gonna go make a few casts with a shallow diver first, and we're gonna go from there. So this guy right here, this right here is a 13 fishing jabberjaw. And so we're gonna just sort of make a few casts around here and sort of see what's going on. I'm seeing a lot of bait fish up high in the water column. So that's sort of telling me like maybe there might be some fish suspended, and they might be up even shallower on this point that I'm not seeing these fish. You know, that's a lot of times. Ooh, there's bluegill. Those fish sort of get suspended in those places, especially when that bait gets high. So I'm starting shallow on this point because I can visually see a lot of the bait up shallow on it. I didn't see a ton off the point of my electronics, so now I'm just using my eyeballs. You can sort of, sometimes you just gotta forget that you have those electronics and sort of see. Do not forget the obvious. Don't overlook it. I've done it several times in my career and you can burn on it. So making those little short casts, I can make these casts around these little bushes, and you can see that's just, you know, a lot of bait fish. Make that crankbait, bounce it off some of that brush, and see if those fish are up there ready to bite. That fish bit that right there on that point. I came over that grass, and you know, I'm trying to sort of pause that crankbait, that square bill, because there is a little bit of grass on this point. Not the biggest of fish, but he got it good. That's sort of that's a good indicator a lot of times when they get that front hook. I like seeing that for sure. Let you go, little buddy. That's definitely a good deal, but your cadence is very important when you're throwing a square bill because you're sort of trying to impart a little bit of action. This little jabberjaw has a good amount of action already, but I'm stopping it, pulling it, stopping it. And if you're deflecting off of stuff, that actually makes it even better. But right now I'm really just imparting a lot of that action myself. As I go and I sort of reel this bait, I'm keeping, there's grass right there. I can sort of see the grass visually with my eyes. So you can see I just got a little bit right there. So I'm trying to keep my rod tip up as I fish around that grass, and then as I get off the edge, I bring my rod tip down. So I can change the depth of my bait by just adjusting the position of my rod. So as I make that go up, it's running 2 feet, I come off the edge, I'm getting down 3 and 4 feet. And that's a lot of times the key, you know, just cranking, casting out and winding, that catches a few fish. But paying attention to your bait and adjusting the depth of your bait is just another little part of the puzzle that allows you to get a few more bites. All right, we're just sort of gonna go down this bank just a little bit. There's a little bit of wind blowing, so I wanna make sure I'm not missing out on something. But I'm starting to see with my electronics down out a little bit deeper, there seems to be a lot of bait out off the point. So at first, when I rolled up there in about that 16 to 12 foot zone, it didn't seem to be that way, but I'm probably gonna try to make a little adjustment to the medium diver and see if that might, I know there's some fish there, there's gotta be. It's a typical textbook spot. All right, so let's just try a little bit different, a little mid-depth, get that 6 out there. And the thing is I'm pretty confident there's some bass. Obviously we caught a few, but there's some more bass on this point. But I can't see them because the grass is pretty thick and the bait is even thicker. I mean, there's a lot of bait on this point. So, and this is the thing, just figuring out the casting angle is definitely the key. The depth, the casting angle, that's all a part of it. So it doesn't mean like, hey, if you get a couple bites on a place, you might not be throwing the exact depth of crankbait or the right bait and technique on that place, and you might need to make an adjustment. So I'm gonna throw that 6 and see if I can, see if that's a little bit better, because I can get just a tad bit deeper, see what goes on. There's one, little one. So I've really been paying attention to where on the point and where in the cast they're eating that bait at. You know, the square bill at first caught a few fish. We've only made a few casts with this little plug and caught one, not the right size, but the best fish that I had hooked was towards the boat. So I'm really paying attention. It was like more out off the point a little bit more. So that's what sort of made me feel like I need to make that transition to a little bit deeper diving crankbait. So starting this only goes probably 2 or 3 feet deeper, but that might make it could be a huge difference in allowing that bait to get down and hit that grass in the top of the grass and make those fish react a little bit better. So that's what I'm pulling off a little bit more. I'm still casting close to where I was, but a little bit further out on this. We're sitting in about 8, 9 feet now. You know, one thing that I always pay attention to is now that I'm throwing a little bit deeper diving crankbait, I'm really paying attention. Ooh, there's a bite. Ooh, that might be a good one. Right there off that corner where I got that same bite. Ooh, that's a nice one. Yep, that might be the deal. As I pay attention to like what's going on, I try to crank that crankbait down there every once in a while, and as I hit the grass, I let it float up. That's the key in making that bait look natural. See, a lot of times people will rip, and sometimes it is the key to getting those fish to bite, is ripping that crankbait out of the grass. But for me, it's more about pulling him. He just slapped at him. Let me see here. He's got a face full of them. All right, buddy. There you go. A little bit deeper diver. That guy right there, this is actually one of my favorite little colors. It's like live river shad. And it sort of just does a good resemblance of multiple different things. I try to, it's sort of like a bluegill, looks like a shad. It's just sort of a good go-to color. When the water's clean, it's got a little foil finish. For me, that's definitely one of my go-tos, but there you go. Pretty nice little fish right there. Post spawner, you can tell he's been trying to feed up a little bit. Hey, let's see if we can't catch a few more of your buddies. So now I'm sort of spot locked on this place, sitting in 10 feet. So I'm gonna try to see, I always try, when I get a bite, I always try to either spot lock or make a waypoint and make sure that I have that exact angle that I got that first bite at. Because a lot of times you're looking for a group of fish when you're fishing major points in places like this. The wind's blowing really well, and it seems like they want to be on the front edge of that grass. They weren't on the back edge as well. The front edge where the wind is actually hitting that point. I'm assuming that just gives them the little ambush point where that bait comes over that point. Those fish can really get out there and get after it. But That's the key. Every once in a while you'll see me, I'll just sort of feather it through some of that grass. When I get down there where I feel like I'm down there pretty deep and hitting some of it, I slow it down a little bit. But until then, I crank him pretty fast. There's one. Another one right on that exact same angle. All right, I see you, bro. Spot lock down. There you go. There we go. Got him right there. And that's what you look for, right there where that fish was hooked. Front hook. A lot of times I'll change the bait. It could be the action of the bait or the color of the bait, but when I'm getting that fish and they're eating it with the front hook, that is a huge key. If I'm not getting that, maybe it's the action of the bait's working well or it's the color, I might switch it up. So if I'm not getting this fish where they're not getting the front hook, I'll a lot of times swap the color first. And then if that doesn't work, I'll swap the actual bait and go to a different action style crankbait. That seems to work for me. That right there is what these fish are set up on. They're sitting in that grass, and you gotta imagine your crankbait comes through there and you hit it and I let it sort of float back up and then crank it some more. That's how I like to fish a crankbait in grass. When it hits that grass and I feel it, instead of burying it through there and jerking it out, a lot of times that can jack them up a little bit. You don't get as many bites. As it hits it, I let it float back up and then you crank it over. That's a lot of times when they bite it. Ooh, ooh, that's a bass. It's a good one. Ooh. Nice one. Yep. Got him good too. Thanks, buddy. All right, come here. Don't get me in the finger with that dang hybrid treble. There we go. Now that fish right there literally hit it probably 10 feet out from the boat. So I'm starting to see a lot of the bait out here in this little edge. And it seems like the grass is growing out a little bit further on this side of the point than the actual other side where I actually got them shallower. So I'm actually gonna pick up the DT10 and try a little bit different setup and see if I'm missing a few out here deeper. That's a lot of times when you're fishing a point too, this is something that it's always, sometimes the actual top of the point is not where they're located. Sometimes it's the side of the point. So you might have a point that extends way out off the bank, and there might be a tip of it, and yeah, there'll be some fish out there. But sometimes the schools, as the summer goes on, they will transition to the side of the points because of pressure. And so that's a lot of times what I'll sort of, this one doesn't run out super far, like it only runs out maybe 100 yards or so, maybe 50 to 100 yards or so. But on those further, longer extending points that I have all over the country that we have, it seems like sometimes the side of the points to the juice area, especially later in the summer, it goes. There he is. Not a big one. That one definitely got it though. Well, you know, the one thing that as I position on these points and as I sort of go and try to go through my progression of what I'm going to throw, I'm trying to find a group of fish because points tend to have the setup for those groups of summer fish that we like to target. And I mean, points are obviously great in the wintertime, summertime, springtime, really bad anyway. They're transition places for fish or places that they actually hold on. The thing is, I might start, every time I go out there, I might start on the tip, but do not overlook the sides of the point. A lot of times, as I start on the tip and I catch a few, that might be a few fish out there, but the big school might be along the edge. And that's sort of what I try to look at. I try to fish around the whole point to determine if there's fish there. I try to determine the whole point, especially if it's a place that I can't graph. If I can graph it and it's in 10, 12 to 20 foot of water and it's not a grass fishery, then at that point in time, I can graph and utilize my electronics and they can do a little bit of the fishing for me. But when you're talking about grass and fish that are set up in grass, you can't graph those as easy. So you truly have to fish a lot of the water to find them. So as I start on the tip of the point, I'll work down the edge. And a lot of times where it connects from deep water to the bank, you actually have a group of fish there and a group of fish out there on the tip of the point. So The ones a little bit closer to the bank don't seem to get as much pressure though. It makes them a little bit easier to catch, if you know what I mean. Oh, there he is. Smoked it. So I pulled out probably where my boat was sitting and I could see all that bait. And that, it's obviously there's fish that are set up all along it, but the better quality fish definitely seem to be set up off the point. The square bill caught a few, but the better quality group of fish is definitely pulled off a little bit more. And as I graphed through there, it definitely seemed like those fish wanted to be out there where that bait was in that 8 to 10 foot zone. So we're more of a medium depth. Now this is the thing, you're not obviously gonna have fish set up on a point like this all the time. So that's not always realistic, but you might find a 3 or 4 fish school and you might not get a bite at all on the square bill, might not get a bite at all on the 6 footer, but then you might catch them all on a DT10 or whatever your particular choice of a medium diving crankbait is. And that's really what I'm trying to teach you more than anything. Like obviously there's quite a few fish on this place right here, you know, and you're not, that's not typical, you know, I mean, there's a lot of places on the Tennessee River they'll set up like this, but you know, a lot of times 3 or 4 fish on a point can be a very good location, a very good place, you know, to fish, whether it's just fun fishing or in a tournament, and trying to find those little smaller groups can be just as good. But the key really truly is starting with the selection and the depth selection of your plugs. If I start, you know, having that square bill with the jabber jaw, having the DT6, having the DT10, really being able to utilize that. And I might even put in a DT14 just if I have to, because I'm starting to see even more fish out here right underneath the boat. I'm 2 casts from where I was casting before. So a lot of times with grass, it's just more about being able to make long casts and be efficient as you cover that depth zone. And figuring out the depth zone is the biggest key that I've seen on grass fisheries, hands down. So that's why I always have a few crankbaits on there. You know, you might have your favorite crankbait, you might have your favorite one, but always add a couple more to the arsenal. Never hurt anything. So as far as, you know, a cranking rod and a cranking setup, you know, I like a moderate action. I don't really like a fast action. Truthfully, my favorite is a graphite composite. I think it loads up the best. That's just what I'm throwing right now, a 7.2 medium heavy cranking rod. But, you know, really it's personal preference. Graphite can work well, and it's gonna allow you to feel the bait a little bit better. But I sort of like that dull feeling that you're gonna have with a graphite composite in the low that you get on that rod. It allows those fish to get it a little bit better. I just feel like sometimes if I feel the fish on a graphite rod, especially when I'm fishing a little bit closer corners like where I'm like roll casting, I tend to set the hook, and that's not necessarily the best way to catch those fish on a crankbait. As far as line, I throw 12-pound Suffix advanced fluorocarbon. That's sort of my standard. If I need to go up higher when I'm throwing a square bill, I will to a 14 or a 17, even a 20. You can adjust the depth of your bait that you're fishing by adjusting your line size. You know, I would say a DT6 will go about 7 feet. I actually did this test on live scope. It'll go about 7 feet on 10-pound line, but then it'll go even 8 foot deep on 8. So if you're trying to get a bait a little bit deeper, you can do that as well. As far as real gear ratio, I tend to go with a 6:3 to 1 gear ratio until I get up to those little bit bigger plugs of a DT16 and a DT20. But I even still will use a 6:3 to 1 gear ratio reel on those if I really am trying to burn those baits through those fish. So that's my setup for the most of the time. Is if I'm fishing, you know, Tennessee River style stuff or going offshore and throwing a 16 or a 20, I will adjust my rod to more of a 7-11 because now it comes down to distance. I'm trying to get that crankbait out there as far as I possibly can to get that bait get down there very deep. And so that's when I'll sort of bump it up to that Micro Magic Pro to a 7-11, but I still keep it to a medium heavy. I don't like those flimsy rods. I don't feel like you can feel what's going on down there. I don't feel like you can, you don't get as good a hookup ratio. For me personally, that's what I prefer. So all personal preference, but that's what works for me. Right now I have 3 different crankbaits, but they're all the exact same setup, you know, and I'll make that adjustment if I have to and go up as the baits get a little bit larger. But right now I'm not having to make that adjustment. It's 12-pound line, get you a cranking rod and just go to cranking. It's really not too crazy. You just got to sort of take your time and feel around every once in a while.